Today's mountain hasn't got a name. Well, it probably has got a name, but it's not named here. And I'm going to read from John chapter 6 and the first 13 verses. It's a familiar story. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountain and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" And then we get one of these little asides from John. He asked this only to test him, because he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place. Don't you just love John and his eyewitness detail? We needed to know that there was plenty of grass for them to sit on. And they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. And you can add on a few thousand women and children, no doubt. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw No, I don't need to go any further. I've read my verses. That's lovely. Nothing wasted. All eaten. There are 2 stories similar to this, aren't there? There's the feeding of the 5,000, there's the feeding of the 4,000. And if you want to have a look at those 2 stories, Matthew has both of them. So you could read them both in the Gospel of Matthew. And they differ I could go into it, I could go off at a big tangent here, but they differ in the sense that one is provision enough for the day and the other is an overflowing, ample provision. Take a look at them. They are both very interesting. This is John's telling of the story, and in fact, David, I think you did it a week or 2 ago, didn't you? You were looking at the 7 signs, and this is one of the 7 signs of John. But I don't know what angle David took, so I'm very happy to take this as a mountain story. And John always has a slightly different view, doesn't he? He doesn't often take the kind of view that the other disciples, the other gospel writers do. And John gives us a snippet of this story that the other gospel writers don't include. So it gives a slightly different dynamic. And that difference is that little conversation that goes on with Philip. Jesus said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" And John says it was a bit of a test, really, because Jesus already knew what he was going to do. It was a bit of a test. Philip isn't one of the most prominent disciples of the group. He wasn't one of Jesus' inner circle, not part of Peter, James, and John, but nevertheless one of the disciples. So we don't actually know very much about him. And we don't know why Jesus chose to test him in this way. I wonder if there were little things like this for all the disciples along the road, but we don't get to hear about those in quite the same way. Poor Philip, his is made public for all to read down through the generations, and I think it has something to say to us as well. Philip was from the same place as Peter and Andrew, probably a fisherman like them too. And we know something a little bit different about him because he had a Greek name. Philip wasn't an Aramaic name that would have been found in that region. It was a Greek name, and it means lover of horses. So why his parents chose to call him that, we don't know. But what we do know about this man is that he has an incredible brain, because Jesus had no sooner said, wow, look at that crowd coming. And he turns to Philip and he says, where will we get bread for them all? Philip was a local man. It was not silly to ask him, because, he would have known where the shops were, the bakers. And he's no sooner said it, and Philip goes, can't be done. Can't be done. Because what he's done is he's calculated the size of the crowd. He's worked out how many loaves will feed a family. He's multiplied the number of loaves by their price and equated that sum to an average salary and the days of labor required to earn it. I mean, this man must be a walking calculator, mustn't he? Because he says his answer is 8 months' wages wouldn't buy enough bread for each one to just have a bite. He didn't just pluck that out the air, did he? He must have had some kind of ability to do some calculations. But basically, Jesus has asked him a question, and he said, can't be done. Has Jesus ever asked you a question and you've gone, can't be done? I bet most of us have in one way or another through our lives. The thing about this, though, is that Jesus asks, where can we buy bread? And Philip answers a different question. He doesn't answer the question that begins with where. He answers the question that Jesus didn't ask, that begins with how. How will we buy bread for this lot? That's the question Philip answered. So if you just think back to those times when Jesus has asked you a question and you've gone, can't be done. Did the question start where? And you answered a different question in your can't be done, I wonder. Philip might be a walking calculator. He might be a walking analyst. But he's missed out. Did you ever do long division? All of those, I expect you did, and long multiplications, whatever they were, and you ended up with lines and lines and lines of figures, yes. That was a very heartfelt yes. Yes, lines and lines of figures. Before the days of pushing the buttons. I've still got a slide rule. Did you have a slide rule at school? Yes, yeah. Not sure I could use it now, but anyway. Philip does not factor in faith. It's just not there. It's not there. He excludes the possibility that it's Jesus asking him the question of what Jesus could do. He's been with Jesus some time. He must have seen all the things that Jesus could do. And yet he doesn't say, well, Lord, gosh, why don't you provide it? You've done things like that before. He doesn't say that, does he? He asked a question, he answered it literally, and the conclusion was, can't be done. If you're a bit like Philip, it may be that you take things very literally, very analytically, and leave God out the equation. It's easy to do, isn't it? It's very, very easy to do. But if the lens of faith had been added in to Philip's calculations, I wonder what he might have said, because Philip only sees the limitations. Jesus sees the infinitely possible. Philip looks at the problem. Jesus looks at Father. And there's a world of difference, isn't there, between those perspectives. If I were in Philip's shoes, how might have I answered? I don't think I'd have done any better than Philip did, to be honest. I'd have probably said, well, the shops are shut. It's still a can't be done, isn't it? The shops are shut. And anyway, how many shops will we need to go to feed that lot? The different lenses that we wear in our spectacles give us different perspectives, don't they? If you're wearing a lens of grief at the moment, or a lens of despair, or a lens of anger, a lens of hopelessness, a lens of depression, a lens of no idea where life's taking you at the moment, that is going to bring a different perspective. But don't leave out the lens of faith. Because when you put that, it's like being at the opticians, isn't it? You know, and they do that thing where they bring all these things. Is that clearer? Is that clearer? I've no idea. That's how it feels, isn't it? I've no idea. But if you took a moment to put the lens of faith in, whatever the situation is that you're looking at right now, what difference might that bring? If you allow the possibility of looking to Father, what might that bring? I think this, for Philip, was a growth lesson. It was a faith lesson. And we all need those, don't we? This one happens to be on the top of a mountain. But I don't suppose Philip forgot it. And I wonder if every time he went back to that place, he thought, I remember what happened here. I remember what happened here. You see, Philip could have focused on, why did he ask me? Why me? There's all these other disciples. Why didn't he ask them? Why me? He could have gone down the line of, it's not fair. He could have gone down the line of, oh, that hurts a bit. And then not see what God wants to do in his life. The why me response takes us nowhere, does it, ultimately? We might indulge in a bit of self-pity, but it doesn't go anywhere in the end. What we need to do is to walk through the doorway of growth and see the prospects that lie beyond it. So the mountain yesterday was a challenge for the woman at the well, whose picture of worship was blown out the water, blown off the mountain. And today, it's a place of challenge for Philip to include faith in his analysis of situations for the future. Mountains, challenging places in the company of Jesus, aren't they? So far, anyway. I don't know which mountain David's going to do tomorrow, but you will find out.